Hello, you guys. Welcome to Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson. I am your lovely and always high-spirited host, Doc, and I am here with the co-host today, and she is out right now, but definitely coming back in a bit. I'm going to go ahead and jump into like the little countdown thing so that we can jump right into the show and get things going on this alternate day. So I'm going to play some of the titles or some of the banners for what we're talking about today as the countdown kind of rolls. So I'll see you guys back in just a minute, literally. You guys, so let's get this show on the road, as they say. So tonight we're going to be talking about a plethora of things. Let me bring in my what do you call this thing? My mic. Ooh. My friend. Is that good? I hope that you guys can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me. If you can't, let me know also. Let me see. I'm hoping this is working. So our first topic is going to be the current state of the country and mental health matters. This is what I call the age of influence. You know how they have the Renaissance period and all that wonderful stuff. I call this the age of influence because I feel like social media has such a high impact on the way that people ultimately jail or do not jail with others. And that impacts the way that we see the world kind of unfolding in front of us. So I'm going to defer to Susie. What do you think about the impact of social media on mental health? Kind of influence in general.
I think that's where people have not knowing go to get an answer. And so what the symptoms they see themselves presenting with. And oftentimes, the reality is that a lot of the stuff that's posted on social media is not accurate. It's not even not accurate, it's just wrong. And it's actually kind of dangerous because if you believe what you read, then you perceive that's how you are. And sometimes that's not. Some folks who are in a bad place, really bad place. And then if you've got people who are co-signing that kind of thinking, then it really puts yourself in a situation where things will get worse and will get better if it gets better. And then you start to think you don't need help because you're getting help from social media. And that's a really dangerous place to be. If that's where you're making the decisions, what you get from social media. Okay. That's why we talk about really trying, if you've got issues that you have concerns about, seeking out someone who is trained in understanding what that is and can help you understand what you're going through and how you can navigate through that, the issues you're experiencing, make things feel better for you.
But I'll also add to that, like, people are more likely to Google their own symptoms. They're likely to Google what they think they may see as a certain symptom, what they are perceiving to be a symptom, and put that out there before they are open to going to see a professional, because I think there is still some level of a stigma associated with a person pursuing mental health help. But also, I think that that's also something that's happening in the area of general medicine as well. I think people have gotten kind of so accustomed to Googling everything, because Google does have a plethora of resources. And let me let you guys know this: Google is the equivalent of a pamphlet that you might receive after you come in to see a practitioner for an appointment, right? And perhaps even the equivalent of, because I know a lot of people do a lot of street or recreational drugs, right? So I'm going to make this reference. Now, in no way am I or this channel promoting you go out there and start using illicit substances, okay? But I'm going to make this reference because I feel like if you're not a user of these substances, you know a person who does, right? So it's the equivalent of trusting secondhand information and not necessarily getting your pills or your drugs from the dealer, but trusting how much you should take of any particular drug just from a person that's like second or third hand that doesn't have any experience with the drug either, right?
And trusting that you are actually getting what you think you're getting.
Right.
Marijuana is really marijuana. Is it really heroin? Is it really cocaine?
Is it laced with something? That kind of thing. Because I do think that the age of influence, because there are so many people, it's like peer pressure back in the day. So many people are into taking shrooms. So many people are into doing edibles. So many people are into smoking weed. So many people are into vaping. I was watching, I think it was like a commercial, because I don't watch a lot of TV. Okay. And I happened to be kind of stopped in my tracks by hearing an advertisement that was on the television in my home. I think maybe my daughter was watching something on TV or something, or my husband. And I was like, are they serious? They're talking about launching a campaign to promote parents sitting down and having a conversation with their children about the dangers of their children that are in high school vaping. The last time that I checked, you could not purchase cigarettes or anything like that until you're like 19, right? I don't know. I don't even smoke, right? So why are you even launching a campaign for parents that start having a conversation with their kids? Because if parents don't know that their kid is vaping and they don't know the dangers of vaping, if they haven't had those conversations on their own, what makes you think that playing a commercial is going to get the attention of the parent that isn't even attentive to their kid? Like, some of these things have me asking several questions. Like, what do you feel about seeing something like that on publicized television? Like, what do you think that says about where we are, the state of the country that we live in, and censorship, and what they feel? When I say they, I mean the powers that be, media and social media and things like that, their responsibility to then engage in or control or influence people in the community. And they're about to parent their kids. Like, what does that say about us? Like, I have so many thoughts about that.
I know what commercial you're talking because I saw that commercial and I thought the same thing. I'm like, I think the message they want to hear is that you need to have conversation with your kids before they start that stuff. But that, in fact, what the commercial, that's the idea that they're presenting in doing the commercial, but that's not what the commercial is about.
Yeah, because the commercial talked about the number of
Right.
kids that are now vaping versus the number of kids in 2020 that are vaping. And it features a kid who started vaping back in like 2020 who is now in college. And she talks about her experience with trying to quit. And I've always told people for the longest since vapes came to be, they're extremely dangerous for your brain and your lungs, not just your lungs, right? And it's just, they're like, oh, well, that's not what the science said. There is no science. This is new. So you're science. You become the science. It's called medical common sense, right? So if a person that is a medical provider of any type is giving me that type of information, then I'm not jumping to try because I don't want to be the guinea pig. But that's me. I'm a person that believes in low risk, high reward. So, everybody's different. Everybody's different. I'm not a risk taker, not in that way. So, but I'm just curious. So, do you think that says that the country that children can vape or they can't? I'm gonna look up the laws.
Well, I think
I know what they're
that's
doing.
what the message they want, but because they're misinformed, because there's always conversation, but you need to have conversation with your kids about the reality of things in life. But I think what the message came across as that you are in some sense okay that this is that your kid can or that you know your kid is and that it's okay, when in fact that's probably not their purpose. But because they themselves are misinformed about understanding what these kinds of drugs have the potential to do to someone's body, and how to advertise that is another issue because we don't know how to advertise what it is the message is really needing to put out there for the society to get. So when society looks at it, right, they believe, oh, it's okay for us to talk to our kids about it. But what are you not? The issue is not to talk to your kids. It's not about talking to your kids about not using drugs. Why are you talking to your kids about using something that they shouldn't be using in the first place because they're not okay?
Right.
Right.
And I feel like it's necessary to have the conversation around. This is gonna sound kind of double standardish, but I do feel like it's necessary to have a conversation about substance use. But and by the way, I'm gonna tell you guys what I found. Okay. But I feel like you shouldn't have to have the conversation about vaping because I feel like that falls under prohibited items conversation. Kind of like the conversation that you have with your children as they're growing up. At 11, right? At 8, when they're seeing these things, they're exposed to the public, right? And they're asking questions, and you're like, yeah, that's what adults do. When you become adult at 21, then you know what I mean? We can talk about what that looks like, but it's that. But I don't even think parents are doing that part, right? So what I found is 2 directives actually. It says currently vaping is illegal for anyone under the age of 21. Sell or barter any of the prohibited products to individuals under 21. And it's also a felony if a person is caught with vaping material that's over 5% THC balance, I think it is. So I think that's the current law. And it says that Georgia Smoke-Free Air Act amendment went into effect on July 1st, 2023, prohibiting the smoking and vaping inside most public areas. That's a separate directive.
Does it talk about stores not having them in front on the counter? That's where you find that stuff.
but no. But it says Georgia's Tobacco 21 law by Fulton County government release says that it's unlawful for any individual under the age of 21 to purchase, use, or possess any cigarettes, tobacco products, or tobacco-related objects, alternative nicotine. So that includes vapes. So that's interesting to me. That's new news to me because I thought it was 19, right? I think that's a more responsible way to approach the thing, but that's okay. So this is a problem, okay? And I'm all about accountability. My problem is we're still allowing government sanctions and government to control the minds and the boundaries, if you will, of parents. I think parents have to be encouraged and supported in their role as parents. And I think to make a law says that we are not trying to encourage parents to be parents. What do you guys think about that? You let me know what your thoughts are. But that makes me a little uncomfortable. I feel like where we are currently as a country, we're moving so far away from holding people accountable and allowing people to live and be responsible individuals who are in control of their own lives. And it's as if we are pretty much robots that are being controlled by our government. One of the things that I noticed is that even Mark Zuckerberg, is that his name? Mm-hmm. The founder of Facebook, Meta, and all of that, he's recently spoken out about him feeling very pressured by our current president and their cabinet around some of the things that they did when it comes to the approach of sanctions on people or censoring what people post on their social media. And I think that he's seen the fallout of that. I think TikTok really blew up because of that, because people are looking for somewhere they could be fully expressive and not be restricted to express themselves. Because, you know, during the Joe Biden era in 2021, you know, I know you guys remember when all of this, he's being called to attest in front of Congress and that sort of thing as to what his laws are and his bylaws, of a person being on Facebook, blah, blah, blah. You know, what methods he's using to control misinformation. And the thing, I have several things to say about that. What is misinformation? I want you guys to define what you see misinformation to be. Because misinformation, according to the Biden administration, was anything that promoted people to not be vaccinated, right? Anything that spoke to what current medical science told us, and is still telling us about the process of vaccinations, concocting vaccinations, virology that looked like it refuted whatever their agenda was at that point. I think that as a government, we have to have an agenda, right? And those agendas become our political platforms in which we run on. And then we have our job, right? Which is governing for the people, right? And our job and our agenda cannot necessarily always be one and the same, because sometimes the people don't want what you want, right? So it's a country of freedom, right? Freedoms, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So you have to allow people to live their lives and be independent of government. And you don't allow that if you're trying to like post sanctions on everything that they do and tell them how to be, right? Our children are not our property. And we're taught as parents to allow some freedom, some flexibility, because we're preparing them to be independent individuals going into the world, right? And that's supposed to be a model of what it looks like for our children to now be individuals who are governed by a body of officials that they elect, right? That's essentially what we are teaching them to be and do, and how to see and function in the world. If we do not teach them in that way, and then they go into a world that now wants to control them, and it's a dictatorship. You know what I mean?
That's why you see more vote.
Yeah.
Children,
we see so much chaos.
Intentionally. Right.
Yeah. You see so much chaos now, because it's like, if you want to hold people accountable for simply being human, and you want to hold people accountable for living up to what they commit themselves to, I think that you have to do it strategically.
It's really not about just your standard of how things should be.
Exactly.
You can't say, I want people to have freedom of speech and freedom to be how they are, yet they've got to be your.
Right, because then when they speak, you suppress what they've said. Like,
it's not in line with what people expect to respond. You've got to fit into your box. That's their freedom of speech.
And you know what? I think that kind of is in line with this particular topic, right? We talked about BIPOC or Black representation on last week's show, and I asked people, I kind of pulled what the feelings were. People wanted me to kind of talk about BIPOC and Black representation. That whole like that area of expectation, as people are now looking at Kamala to be elected and be the president for the Black people, right? And they had that expectation of Obama, right? I think that mindset of, what is that? You remember that what goes on in this house stays in this house?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that has long been handed down in Black American culture. And I think that that's one of the main reasons that people do not pursue even therapy. And
that's not, to be honest, as somebody who wasn't born here, that's not just American standard. And that's why West Indian has difficulty pursuing therapy as well, because what goes on in this home, it's fixed in this home. That's why we've got a grandmother who's the central theme of the life of the home. So stuff gets fixed through her, grandmother and grandfather. Doesn't go out to a therapist. Doesn't go to a therapist.
So in that respect, that intergenerationally handed down resistance to getting or trusting outside help, that kind of speaks to the age of influence, people trying to trust within and not necessarily go out and seek health services from a provider.
Well, it's all that we know, so it's not resistance. It's all that you know. And what you know is what you've grown up in, and that has been the system that has worked.
Yeah.
It's fixed. It has fixed things. Grandmothers have fixed stuff in the family. Fixed the marriage.
Has she?
Well, yes. Because the perception is that there is no divorce and they're still together regardless of who went outside of the marriage and created other stuff. She held this marriage together for 50 years, 60 years. She has held it together.
Well, I believe that has some level of truth.
That's my culture. I'm speaking for my culture.
But it's not just right. That's why I labeled it BIPOC, right? Because BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. So it's all people of color, essentially, right? And there are some symmetrical components of conditioning across cultural lines when it comes to us as melanated people.
I see some similarities with my West Indian heritage and American.
And I see similarities in Jamaican heritage. I see similarities in African heritage. I even see similarities in Indian culture and even in Asian culture. It's really heavy, to be honest. So I think that people in general, that's why I always say, like, this show, we talk about things that are accountability related, matters that affect Black and brown or melanated communities. But I think that these are things that affect and apply to a plethora of population, right? It's just more of a call to action. I feel like the things that we need to be talking about as Black and brown people, because I feel like these are things that sometimes, some of these things as we get down this line are things that I feel like are things within our grasp or our grip or control, things that we can get a handle on and maybe start to repair, right? Some of those things, reshape what they look like. But I feel like having that expectation of this woman to be a president for Black people, that thing,
it's heavy.
Yeah. And I just wonder, I wonder sometimes, like, what does that mean?
It means the removal of white racism, white systemic way of being or thinking. I think that's really what it is. And Obama has made it clear that he's not president for the Black people. He's president of the people in the United States of America because he's got to run the country, not the Black. Because we cannot do to others what was done to us. I mean, that's what that is. You're a Black president, so you take care of just Black people and not the other part of folks who exist in this country. You are asking the president to do to the other part of the country what you said we have been doing. Not giving you the kind of rights that you require as a Black person in this country. We are now saying because you're a Black man or a Black woman, we need to get all the rights, all the money, all the whatever recognition. We won't get it.
So then my question then becomes, are you not racist then as Black people, right? So if we want a president, we want a person to be elected in the office of president, but only to represent the interests of one group of people, which is a fraction of the other groups of people that are here, right? Because, I think that the days are long gone where it's Black versus white in America. We've got people of all nationalities living right here on U.S. soil, and they are citizens. You have to be a universal or eclectic president. You have to listen to the people, find out what the needs are, and then deliver on the promises that you make to resolve some of the needs that they've expressed to you, at least the ones that you committed to, right? So my thing is, it's like there are so many different levels to that for me. I think in order for Black people to have proper representation, the first thing that Black people have to do is to get out of their own way. One of the therapeutic principles that I teach as a psychotherapist is calling a thing a thing. And it's really just self-actualization. It's us coming to a place where we call things what they are without judging them, right? Because if we judge a thing, we are going to lean one way or the other, because our internal biases are going to help us to straighten our crown, if you will, right? To lean in a direction to where the world sees us as politically correct or acceptable or right. And I think that if you lean outside of that, the internal bias of right or wrong, where you're calling a thing, then you can take a step back and look at the thing from the outside and figure out what needs to be done with that thing to bring it into focus where it's more conducive of what your long-term goals are, right? So we can do that by focusing on some of the small things that we have to do, the minor steps that we have to make in order to achieve the long-term goal. So some of those short-term objectives. And now we're focused on what we're doing more so than how are the people going to see me that are watching me do the thing, right? Or that have watched me live my life in this way that this thing became a thing. So when it comes to Black people, we have to say, well, I have a tendency to lean or think that people are looking at me or making decisions about things that I've applied to do based on the color of my skin. Okay. And then slowly work your way to confirming or debunking that. right? Because you're not leaning one way or the other, right? So you're just looking like, okay, so when they said, did you work for all of these businesses in the last year? And you have 8 different companies that you worked for in the last year. And you're trying to demonstrate that you have staying power, dedication, loyalty, right? Work ethic.
You had enough time to create something else.
Right.
Done.
And you're not new to the work, but even if you're new to the workforce, but you have changed jobs almost every month of the past year, and your only justification is something, because that's what you're going to go to too. Why did you shift? Not the employment contract ended, but my manager didn't like me, or my coworker was being messy, or
microaggression.
I slept with my coworker and things became weird after we broke up. We have to ask ourselves, is that person then exercising a microaggression, really, right? Or is it us who needs to find ourselves in a place to where we can articulate our lack of maturation in an interview, right? And introduce this newfound maturation that we've stepped into as to why it is we're now dedicated to planting ourselves somewhere and flourishing in a way that says we want to be at a company for 10 years, 20 years. You understand what I mean? Like, so it's that process, I think, that helps us as people to understand that we don't need Black representation. We need universal representation, because a person who can bring groups of diverse people who live in and are citizens of the same country, the person that can bring us all together collectively and encourage us to work together collectively, because we're all collectively human, one and the same. That person has the ability to lead us, because that person has the ability to listen to what our individual needs are and how it is that we could possibly lean into helping other groups of people who don't necessarily look like us or represent our background as far as our cultural heritage, right? So I think that we have to be, you know what I mean? That's where I am on it. What about you?
I agree.
Like, I just don't get, I don't get the whole give me BIPOC or Black representation. Like, I don't.
It's gonna fix everything for Black people, and it's not. It's not designed. It's not designed to do that, and it's not going to do that.
I don't think it can do it. No. I don't think that we are capable as people of stepping into a place to where we are allowing a person to lead us just because they have a certain skin color, and because what does that say when that person doesn't do the things for you that you think a person of color should be doing for you, because you're not the only type of person that's out there that's of your color.
Well, there are words that Black call. There are many that they are called.
There are many words that they're called. I'll agree. I'll agree with that.
And that's the reality. Obama has gotten something.
Oh yeah, Obama has gotten a lot of those words.
He's joined in with the other side.
Right, but I feel like those are the things that to me create this platform where we have to own our internal biases as people of color and say that we are just as individualized and want to create segregation just like other groups of people have in the past. So we're really getting nowhere. So
and that we do have some racial traits.
We have racist. No, it's not. We don't have racist traits. Okay. Many Black people are racist. Period. Flat out. And that's the piece of calling a thing. Okay. So we're going to be people that are biased. Biases exist because if they did not, we wouldn't be humans that are individuals, right? The level of differentiation from person to person creates in and of itself a bias because we have preferences, right? So these preferences help us to become healthy individuals who can contribute independently to systems that work together, and now they need us and we need them for a thing. If we were all the same, we wouldn't get anything done as a nation of people. Like, for me, and I know, like, I've had a lot of people who have told me that their assumption has been that I was a Republican. And I've had a lot of people who have told me that their assumption was that I was a Democrat. I've got so many assumptions floating out there. I'm neither. I am an independent voter who will request the ticket of the person who I feel represents the interests of the people that align with me and my values. That's what type of voter I am. I am not an influence, like I mentioned earlier. I don't consider myself an anomaly. However, I am an independent thinking human being. I believe in healthy differentiation. And I believe in listening to people and hearing them out as to what their needs are. And I'm empathetic. So if people have a need, right? And even if I don't identify with that need, right? It doesn't have to be a need, an internal need for me. If I can see how that need definitely needs to be addressed, right? And needs to be mitigated. And I can see that clearly one of these candidates is for it and the other one is against it, my vote will be for the candidate that's going to improve the set of circumstances that applies to this individual that represents a collective where this thing is happening multiple times over and over, and I've empathized with their plight. So not all the time am I going with the person who represents my own personal interest, but I'm looking at the universal interest of and needs of the collective, we the people. Because I'm not really a big people person. However, I'm a person that is logic based. Okay. So if a bunch of people have a lot of need, right? And those needs are leading to a ripple effect of chaos, disorganization, lawlessness, constantly breaking the law. Breaking the laws in ways that it could affect me eventually. Right? The only logical way that I would vote is to mitigate those things. I'm just saying. I mean, I don't know about you guys. We're all different, right? But I'm not party loyal. I'm sorry. I'm just not. Because there are some values that I just don't agree with. Yeah. So, I vote person over party, and not person over party for them being black or brown or white or orange, but it's based on them having value systems and a political platform that aligns with what I think is important for the moment, for our country. It's just that. And I encourage people to vote common sense versus down party lines, because sometimes you've got to look beyond the party, because you'll be blinded. That creates a double bind like you wouldn't believe. There's no way you can sleep when a person is acting out of, in their eyes, good faith, but clearly in your eyes, it's a bias there, right? Might be money, maybe blackmail, could be a lot of things. But those people's decisions, or maybe some law that they're trying to push right forward, has a negative impact on the majority of people in the United States. There's no way I could support something like that, right? So my thing is, we have to get out there and we have to vote common sense. We have to look beyond these advertisements and political campaigns that are looking to allow us to vote on the person based on who they are or what they look like versus the politics of the person.
What they actually going to
right
make this.
Yeah, what are you going to do to change things? Because right now, I feel like this is, when I say the state of the United States, I feel like we're now in the most volatile state that I know people that are living in my age range, okay, have ever seen. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything like this. And to be honest, I can recall learning and listening to my grandfather as he told me stories of his experience, Great Depression. And after, and I was just like, oh, well, that's never going to happen.
Price of eggs.
And here we are.
Price of eggs.
I used to complain about going to Hawaii and having to buy milk or eggs over there. I'm like, oh, we don't need that. We can just deal with not having that while we're on this trip. And now we're paying those prices at the grocery store as if that's the norm. And it's not okay. And we're still looking at the fact that the minimum wage hasn't raised. And I have a lot of questions. And there are no answers for my questions. As a private citizen, I think that if I'm electing you into office, I'm going to need you to answer at least 2 questions of an interview straight.
Well, I have got to understand what it is you selling in the country.
Right. But that's the purpose for my questions. Right. But I think that I feel like I'm being bamboozled, okay? Mm-hmm. Left and right. And it's uncomfortable. So I feel like politically, hey, Kale, I feel like politically, we've got to be people that are making decisions that are based on what are the interests of us as individuals? What are the interests of our families? What are the interests of our people? Right? Those are the people that look like us, yes, in our communities, right? But it may not mean who looks like us color-wise, right? It may mean the people who are in the same socioeconomic situation as we are, who live in the same county, territory as us, the same city, territory, state as us, and how it is that we'll be impacted by this next election, those types of things. I just feel like it's a lot out there that drives the stressors, and we end up seeing the fallout of that. During the age of influence, I feel like there is one thing that becomes the centralized focus or theme, and then it takes off. And that's what I'm seeing. Like, at first, Facebook was the thing, right? Then Instagram, and then YouTube, and then TikTok, and then Snapchat came before TikTok, right? Yeah, Snapchat, and then TikTok. So all of these different things have taken off one after the other based on what someone else said was popular or effective for whatever goal they had.
And Facebook started off for really like teenagers, and now adults have taken over.
Not teenagers, for college students.
No, they're not on Facebook anymore.
Exactly.
We are. Yeah. We've taken it over.
But it shows that it's the age of influence, even cell phone usage. And I know a lot of iPhone users are going to be really upset with me when I say this, but you even see the age of influence in cell phone companies, because Apple is now trying to copy Samsung, which is always the thing. It's interesting to me how everybody buys Apple phones, and that's also an age of influence thing. Everybody's got to have an iPhone. And there's an iPhone versus Android thing, right? What are the things that you guys notice that are age of influence? And it's okay if you've been caught up in it, because, hey, like I told you, call a thing a thing. But you know, everybody's got to have an iPhone, and then they're like iPhone versus Android, right? And then if you have an Android, then you're this or that, right?
You less than.
Right? But the Android phones have
What's better?
look, the Android phones have had the AI incorporated into things for years, and then here comes Apple talking about the next phone we release.
I think
will be equipped with AI. You know what I'm saying? What AI? I'm so done. And they're like, oh yeah, then you'll be able to say, hey Siri, what's on my calendar for the day? And she'll be able to tell you what's on your calendar for the day and all of that stuff. Right. And they're like, what about privacy? What about privacy? I'm like, child, this has been, where have you guys been the last 5 years?
And iPhone has had the most violations.
I'm telling you. But see, with Apple, I will say that, okay, Apple phones are pretty secure. Apple devices in general, computers in general. I have a multitude of all of them. I don't discriminate. It's based on what I need to use it for. So I will say I've never had a virus on any of my Apple devices. I'll say that. I'm not team Apple or team PC/Android or any of that, but privacy. You know, if you run a business and you want to have reliable, you know, security, privacy, your data, that's going to be Apple for me. But I just feel like we've got to start having these conversations, because if we don't start having these conversations about how it is that we're influenced to do the things that we find ourselves caught up in or doing, then we're just following blindly, right? And the thing about following blindly is that whenever the consequences start to roll out, everybody wants to throw up their hands and say, I didn't know, right? One of the things that I noticed that's going on in our state in Georgia is that you see prosecutors now not trying to, they're doing it. Let's put this one up. They're prosecuting parents for accidental deaths of their children due to them leaving their guns in places where their children got to them, and claiming that these are private spaces. Also, another thing that's happening in our state is that so many cops are being killed, ambushed, people still had astronomical numbers that I can't even count. But yeah. So what do you guys feel like? I want to know what's happening in your state. When you guys catch this on a replay, tell me what's happening in your state. What are some of the things that you notice are things that are going down in the legal battles or in the struggle to reestablish order that's happening in your state, crime rates and things like that? Like, what are some of the things that you're noticing are happening? Joblessness or creating new jobs, etc.
You know, and the other piece is, are you looking for the person who's running the presidency to be more aggressive? Are you hear them talking about the concerns about that?
And how it is that they'll fix those. Right.
Because I'm not hearing that.
What? Yeah, no. I'm not hearing it. I was gonna say, well, there are conversations about gun laws, right? But as I said the other night, you guys, guns do not kill people. People kill people, right? So all the people can be eradicated, and the only elements that are left are all the animals. I guarantee you, guns won't be a problem. They won't be.
Because animals have their own role.
But I think that we have to ask ourselves a question, right, about us as human beings. We're supposed to be the superior of animals, and we have the least amount of morality and ethics when it comes to how it is that we relate to one another, resolve conflict and issues. Now, I'm not saying if we're compared to like lions and stuff, but that's something different. You know, they'll let a man go out and be hungry just because he was born a male. Okay, it's rough out here in these streets. But for humans, I think that we have to be a lot more ethical and a lot more accountable for the chaos that we bring into our world. Okay, we really do, because the amount of people that are currently being killed, the amount of random bodies that are turning up on the side of the road and on porches and on lawns and on, it's like gun violence. Literally just early this morning, there's a mother and a son that were shot, like in the wee hours of this morning. What is going on? Like, why is there no outcry for the support of qualified mental health providers? I think that's my question, right? As a practitioner, I just wonder sometimes what it looks like when we have a president that's actually committed to reforming mental health recognition and what levels of care are given to the community to restabilize the chaos, because that's the answer. It's not gun laws. We saw a bid for it under President Bush late, when he was ending his term, and President Obama and President Trump. What we've seen under President Biden, somebody let me know if you've seen anything, because I've seen nothing, but my vision is sometimes obscured. Aging eyes. So I think,
and it is still not talking.
But that's the thing. I think it only gets talked about when you have these things on the agenda, because you recognize that these are things that need to be addressed. And I know that a lot of people want to give Kamala a lot of credit, but my problem is she's talking about fixing things that have occurred under her leadership and guidance, that have not been touched, that have not even been brought into question. I could see if she was like the Secretary of State running for president now. I could see if she was the Secretary of Defense now running for president, but you were the vice president acting on behalf of the president is what your job is in so many different arenas. You show up as his representation, also with his word backing, right? And none of these things have been done. I want to know, I recall the moment where she's being interviewed right after his debate with Trump. And the question was asked, is this the president? Is this the level of lucid, or awareness in which he's operated with the entire time that he's been in office? That's the question that was asked. She didn't answer it. He danced around it. So for me, those are things that
and there are many instances.
And the fact that this political coup is happening. We're not going to address that. I'm like, why? So why didn't you allow for a mini primary for us to elect you in it? You can't just be delegated like the Supreme Court justice. What do you need to run on a presidential campaign ticket? What?
But you see, I think that can happen because the public fully doesn't understand that part.
I don't think the public understands how unconstitutional this is.
That's right.
It's amazing to
that me. They never had a decision, which you were always supposed to, right?
Right.
Elect somebody in that position.
Imagine if Trump just told everybody, you know what? Don't write their names on a ballot. The American people want me.
What?
Imagine. But he didn't. But he didn't. He ran against everybody and he won. All right. There were like 4 people challenging him on the Republican ticket, and he won hands down in a landslide.
And I'll go out there to say, I know Kennedy attempted for the Democrats.
Exactly.
And
you see Kennedy trying to get listed. What's the other guy's name? I can't even remember. But Donald Trump has now named them. He's picked them up into his party because they've literally just don't.
They're not something we don't know. That's not Trump.
I just feel like this is insane. Like things are happening politically that I have never seen.
But I think,
and I serve this country. I just don't understand it.
But what is guided by why this is happening to this is because we finally have again another black person running, and that's really the platform.
No, I think black people have not accepted Kamala as a black person running on the ticket. I've seen
concerns and questions.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of black men.
But I guarantee you, people still want a black person in position. But black people still want a black person in position, and will.
That's a thought.
Because.
So what does it mean for you guys if we have a black person in the position of president in America? Do you guys want a black person, a person of color, should I say, in office? Because on one of my follow pages on Facebook, right, I am going to go here and look at some of these things because let me tell you guys.
See, I think for me, I want to know what it is, what's the platform, what it is, what is it she's hoping to accomplish? So she's gonna fix the border. She was given the border 2 years ago. 3 years ago, correct?
Right.
And there was, Trump does this. And,
see,
he shows where I
didn't even have. Wait. Let me pause you. I didn't even have to look far because this is the page where I can get everything. Okay, y'all. Okay. It says so. Heels Up Harris is now quoting Nazis. Yeah, that's appropriate. Nazi circa 1933. This is what she says: strength through joy. Yeah, it's literally her quote. I don't know if you knew that. So,
how does that fix the border?
Well, she's strength through joy, right? So it fixes the border possibly if everybody is happy and just receives the people who have come over and crossed the border illegally, whatever their country of origin is. And we understand that it's time for us to get together and support all people with our American dollars without making them American. That's what I think. I don't know. But I'm interpreting that that's got to be what it means because, like, for me, I don't know. So he says it doesn't matter. So you don't think it matters to whether or not a black person is the face of the White House or the country's representation? Is that what you're saying, Justice? And let me know if I'm getting that right.
It should matter. Because when we have this person in position, if they're not able to effectively address the current issues of the country that things actually are going to get worse.
I do agree.
It's already dangerous. The people that are coming to the border are more than Spanish speaking people, by the way.
And that's what I'm saying, right? So you're putting us all not only in danger, but my thing is the cost of living index has gone up tremendously. And the reason is because we have so many different social programs. We're contributing to 2 separate wars happening in 2 separate places that are not even remotely associated or having anything to do with Americans, okay? Mind you, we're just coming off of fighting a war. That was us initiated. So we don't have the money, but we're contributing all of this money, right? And so when we're looking at the cost of living, they're talking about the cost of living index has raised tremendously, right? It's $33,654 to live as a single person in the state of Alabama.
A month?
No. No, that's what a person would have to earn annually to independently live at the lowest level. So we're looking at the cost comparison to what minimum wage versus the reality of just basic survival, no luxuries. I wouldn't be able to
Can't
live.
even live with that, even in Alabama.
I think, is Mississippi the cheapest state to live in? Let me see. Because I think Mississippi is still the cheapest state to live in. But Mississippi is the cheapest state to live in. So let me look at. No, it's not the safest, but it's cheaper. Arkansas is also not the cheapest. Arkansas is $32,979.
Cheaper.
But it's not cheaper than Mississippi. Quality of life would be nothingness. It's like all farmland. Well, I don't know. It depends on how much you value. Let me say that, okay? I don't want you guys going on saying that I said living in Arkansas was for people that didn't want anything out of life, because I'm not saying that, okay? No. What I am saying is, in Arkansas, for a person who enjoys the luxuries of life, but also some scenery and nature, that quality of life it just wouldn't be, befitting. So it would be enough to get you by, though.
Arkansas.
Yeah, but so that, let me know what's happening in you guys' state.
So as wanting to be president of this country, how do you think about that kind of stuff? Is that something we're thinking about? Like, should people in this country live that level of life?
That's a good question, because I didn't want to mention it on the show, but
they call that thing a thing, right?
Well, no, I didn't want to mention this piece on the show. So there is this other piece where people are saying, well, I want to vote for Kamala because she's a Black person. She represents the interest of minorities in America, right? But Kamala is not a minority in America. That's one of the things that I want to point out. For one, she and her family, since coming to America, they have not been minorities in America. And if you go back and you look at their
always been middle class,
okay, financials, they're not middle class. They've never been middle class. That's the reality. Okay. And the next piece is, just because a person is from the lower echelon of society, middle class or lower class people, social status, it doesn't mean that person is going to come into office and represent your interests. Where a person comes from has nothing to do with the platform in which they're going to run on and govern on in order to make sure that you're taken care of. For me, I want to elect a person who is aware and conscious of the realities that we are facing as American people. And the realities are, our economy is in the worst shape that it's ever been in. The minimum wage rate is lower than livable wages anywhere in the United States. And the safety index for our children growing up in this country, it's so low. It's so low. And it's not just that they're at danger, at risk from police, because a lot of people say Black people are being eradicated by the police officers and police brutality. That is definitely an issue for all people, not just Black people. And I'm sorry, that's a reality. My thing is, we have a sitting presidency that refuses to acknowledge the fact that we are in an inflated situation, a Great Depression, number 2. as a result, we have not raised the livable wages, the minimum wages. And that's necessary if you're going to raise the housing index cost and interest rate and things like that. These are things that affect, us being able to survive in this world. You understand what I'm saying? So it's all of that for me. Okay.
And those are things you running for presidency of the United States that you put up there. How am I going to address this and fix this? How am I going to get a cabinet to go with me to address these issues? Because we should not be paying $8 for 12 days. Gas should not be $3.99 in the morning and $4.15. That's just
right.
That's just those
so,
are really.
So I want to read this because Japhis, not everybody is on Facebook. Some people are on YouTube on that platform. So he says it doesn't matter about race. It matters about who's a better fit. The ticket is basically debating. Do you want to go backwards or do you want to move forward? Right? So backwards would be what? What would we be going backwards to? Right? And if we're talking about cost of food and surviving and not being in a war, then I'd say I'd go backward. Because when Trump was in office, those were our realities. Right now, we're in such a financial deficit as a country. And we're in such a volatile situation when it comes to the restrictions around, or should be, on our borders to protect us as human beings. And the crime index, crime rate index is just beyond a discussion at this point. And then we're talking about the realities around just basic human decency. Like, more of our children are dying at the hands of their parents now. And that's disturbing to me. And the reason for that is mental health distress. Those are the things that I would like to hear Kamala talk about, how it is that she is going to address these things to resolve the issue of inflation. That's what I would like to see. That's the reality. Moving forward means that we clean up our mess. We own the fact that we're inside of 2 wars that we can't afford. And then we reinvest that money back into our own economy, into our own people, create common sense laws around immigration issues and reform. And some of that may mean we've got to offer amnesty to the people that have crossed the border illegally if they follow a program, right? That not the program where it is you marry an American and then you go back to your home country and then request, reentries, etc. after 3 years. But if we approach it from a common sense, we definitely need to keep our families together, right? Because we don't want to have children that are now raised at the cost being bared by us as private citizens to take care of them. But giving these people's jobs and giving them a place to start, right? In a way that is responsible, that generates income for our economy, but also stability for them. These are the things that I would like to hear her speak on. But these are things that should be coming from her as a candidate that is running for the office of the president, not from me as a content creator who is a therapist that can see the common sense lines that need to be addressed. My thing is, we have to own our mistakes. If Kamala is the person that now owns her mistakes, I'm all for it. Because like I mentioned, I'm not Team Trump, Team Kamala, Team anybody. If anybody, I will say Tim Walz definitely moves me to a certain position to where I want to vote for her because I know his politics. I know what he stands for. And I know who he is as a person. So that's somebody that I could move forward with, but not in the office of vice president. For me, he was the only viable candidate that should have run against her. And that's how it should have been. So The vice presidency means that you're in the ear of the person, but the person is still responsible for signing and making the, mega decisions. And I just don't feel like she is in that position currently because she's not giving us an interview. I can't feel that way if you won't even answer the questions these reporters are asking you. I have questions as to why it is she hasn't already invoked the 25th, to be honest.
So explain that.
I would love for her to have been invoked the 25th because she should have.
Explain that.
Yeah. So the 25th means that the president that is currently sitting in office is not capable, cognizantly or otherwise, of sitting in the office and making the executive decisions of the president. And that should have been her move right after American people and the entire Democratic convention was sitting there saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? The world just saw XYZ. That's what she should have done instead of trying to be appointed as the delegate that would be now elected into office on a Democratic ticket. She did not, there was no mini primary, none of these things. So if Joe Biden was who we elected, we should have got Joe Biden. If he was found to be incapable of running for president, so we should have had a mini election. That's how American democracy works. You don't get to just appoint someone else to run for you.
So evoking the 25th
makes her a sitting president.
Means that she actually have to say that the current president.
She has to admit to knowing that he was incapable and has some cognitive decline under her watch that prevents him from being able to make the executive decisions of the office of the president. And that's what she should have done.
And as a result, she then becomes the president.
Yeah, she becomes a sitting president, and then we can hold her accountable for things that she does or doesn't do. And as a result of that, we can feel like, let's get behind her because the Democratic convention is coming up in weeks, right? That's what should have happened. That's what should have happened after that debate. That did not.
So then that would have meant other candidates could run because they now want to be president.
Right.
Which is the order of how things generally happen.
Right. And instead wanted to run down time for no reason. As you know, and you're running a distraction campaign. I just don't understand any of that. You say, as a veteran, I understand the issues of this country, but these things take time, years and years of development.
It's been 3 years.
Yeah, they've been in office almost 4 years. And these are not issues that they've sat down or even had a conversation about.
But the public have noticed his decline in 3 years that he's been really at the beginning. We've noticed people have just not addressed it until it got to the point where he has got to the state where his whatever his neurological stuff is going on. It's such a he's not comprehensive.
So
not able to explain stuff in the way that people want.
So let's say this, okay? And thank you for your service, Japhis. I'm a retired United States military officer as well. And it doesn't mean that we are weak as a country if we don't have allies. However, getting involved in matters that don't necessarily concern us, and just to shed some light, the same issues that are currently going on right now in Hamas and right now with the Ukraine and Russia war were going on when President Obama sat in and he was the vice president. There was not a war then. Those are the same issues that continue through the presidency of Trump. There was not a war. So my thing is, if there are just so many different levels to that, right? My thing is, Joe Biden never should have been elected. I personally would have preferred Bernie Sanders. I would have. I'm going to be honest.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, or Warren. But I feel like her being a female.
Here we go.
Her being a female and America being a country that is founded upon the principality of having a strong male leadership coming from that could stand up to and, correct the the issues that happened at the very end of Trump's presidency. I feel like we needed a man for that. You know what I mean? Position. I'm just gonna say, because see, some things like I said, we have to call a thing, right? Some things men have to fight things amongst men. Men have to resolve things amongst men. And there are some spaces that I do feel like females are not necessarily the best fit for, due to the magnitude and the nature of the issues that are currently being tackled. So it's not about, being sexist. It's about being logical. Again, I'm logical, reasonable thinking person. Okay. And although we may have some things that contribute to us being better suited for or equally suited for positions as men, there are just some things that I think men are a better fit for doing. Dealing with the issues of Trump, I think that should have been strong male leadership. That's just my thoughts. But
Well, Bernie also had a really good grasp of what was going on in the country and had some solutions. He put it out there. He talked about how he would fix X, Y, and Z, what other things he would want to do. This man had a platform you can follow, whether you agree with him or not, but he knew what he stands for.
So he says, because anything she says may be misinterpreted and change the momentum. But that's still...
How is it misinterpreted?
So that's still...
She's not saying anything.
That's still admitting to the fact that she's manipulating the American people by not saying something.
I mean, for me, it's like, what has she come out and talked about how she's going to address the war? No.
The only thing that I've seen her actually come out and say is that she's going to fight for a universal or a federal protection for women's rights to abortion.
And there is no clear explanation.
Right. And I don't think that that's the right move to fix that issue. Because if we do that and it becomes a federal legislation, it just increases the taxes that all of us pay. And now we're paying for the sponsorship of abortions for the people that want to get them. Yeah. I think that should be a state-to-state issue. Let the state sponsor, right? Let the states create legislation that covers those people, because health insurance doesn't span across the entire United States. It's region-based. So it's, those are things that
state run, not federally.
Right. And Roe versus Wade was a proper decision simply because what it says is overturning it recognizes that we need to now create legislation that addresses the issue of women's reproductive rights. And I'm all for that because that's what we need. However, we can't reference an illogical amendment, when the two don't add up. So we do need, maybe we introduce another amendment that then says that there are federal protections, but the states regulate that. The states pay for it. They fund it. Yeah. But I think there are several ways to look at that. Just not to where.
But it's not even clear what her policies and what it is she wants to do to address it. I think that's a big one that she put out. She wants to take a look at. But I still don't know what it is she wants to do. There is no clear plan.
There is no clear plan because she's not having the conversation, which is why I think she should be having the conversation. I think that she should at least give us a clear idea of how she wants us to move forward and create space to correct these issues that she spoke about, because she did talk about improving the economic condition and stabilizing blah, 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 right? If we're going to stabilize the economy, if we're improving the economic conditioning of the upper and the middle class people, upper middle class and middle class people, if we're going to do those things, what is your plan specifically? Exactly. What are your plans? The only thing that I saw her mention in her speech was that she was now going to adopt the principle that was introduced by Trump. And that is cutting taxes for waitresses or tip earning, right, individuals. That's a solid plan. Okay. That's a solid plan if she intends to do that. But what are you going to do to address the issue of the deficit in the minimum wage? That's really the issue. That cures inflation. Because so here's the thing. Because I was on one show, I can't understand how it is that people don't understand this, but we're not. This is not, high school government and economics. I feel like that's where you should have got that education. But hey, I'm gonna take you through it. If the prices of the cost of living raise, and if the federal interest rate is raising, right? That also means that minimum wage and median wage and higher wage earning index should also raise. Because you have to have all of these on the same continuum of increase in order to balance the scale, so that people can live affordably and they're not being evicted at astronomical numbers, which is happening every day. Right? So the show that I was on, they were like, well, what does minimum wage have to do with the housing crisis and inflation? I was like, what? I know everybody is not getting a high school education even nowadays, but I don't know. Maybe they're just looking at Google.
Well, because we don't have leadership that put that information out there so that people can understand.
So he said, but they don't want that. They want to control women and like old. I don't understand. They understand that the minority is becoming the majority, so they're trying to eliminate that at all costs. Eliminate what? So, newsflash, Japheth, the minority was Black American people. Black American people are now the majority anyway. Just because we don't fill out the census, sometimes that information is misinterpreted. But that's just what it is.
Because we don't trust people.
Look, we can thank, what's his name? What's that young guy that's having the babies by everybody?
Oh,
you guys know his name. Yeah. Can't think of his name.
Cannon?
Yeah, Nick Cannon. We can thank Nick Cannon. He's going to erase any other race off the planet. Okay. By the time this guy is done, it will all be just black. Because you know what they say, if you got to drop a black, then you're black. There it is. But let's see. The deficit has been an issue for over 20 years, and it's always going to be an issue. But now inflation has shorted, and minimum wage has risen. The federal minimum wage has not risen. It has not. It has not. Not since 1980 something. 82? I want to say. I can't remember. I did a whole show on it. Go to my YouTube channel, Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson, or just go to anywhere you listen to podcasts. And I think that was 5 shows ago, 6, maybe 5 or 6 shows ago. But pulled it up, pulled the stats and all of that stuff, and yeah, it slowed. Progress slowed because I think there was a slight increase in the 90s, so there was discussion about it or something like that. I think progress slowed because people become comfortable. They find a way to adapt and then overcome. The thing is, we can't adapt and overcome this level of inflation because it's so much. You got the housing market that's inflated 300% and 400% in most areas. You know, I don't know. I don't know. So you guys have got to let me know what you think. Let me look it up, right? Minimum wage. Wait. You guys know I'm working with one hand. Yeah. So it's $7.25, and it's the same rate that's been in place for 15 years. That's the federal minimum wage. Okay. That's it. That's it. So if the federal, and just to let you know, that's what the president is responsible for. Introducing bills and legislative ideas to Congress and the House around whether or not these things should move forward, and they should send something, put it on his desk to sign. The last time the idea was floated of increasing the minimum wage, I remember, by President was Obama. Well, I guess Bush kind of floated the idea, but it never went anywhere. But yeah, so that's where we are. I think maybe what you're referring to is your state, or maybe what you see advertised as payable wages, right? So if the minimum wage rises, again, the payable wage index will also increase, which will then make sense for the federal interest rate increases. You see? Because then you still have this index, right? It's a continuum. If food costs are at a certain rate, you should be able to afford it if you are within, what do they call it? Outside of the poverty index. Okay? Because outside of the 100%, 120% poverty index scale, you should be able to afford life. That places you somewhere in the lower middle class. Okay? And that's the reason. I need you to understand the reason why it needs to raise, because the federal minimum wage is what they use to compute the federal qualifications for federal assistance. So a person can't even get food stamps, housing assistance, child care assistance program. These things that are necessary in order for young people that are starting their families prematurely or don't have the means, limited education or access to resources, even military, because by the way, that's also what the military pay charts are based off of, the federal minimum wage index. So they can't afford these things because they can't qualify for programs that'll help them afford the lifestyle outside of those things. So even people who are getting the government assistance will still end up getting put out because they still can't afford it. You see what I'm saying? Like, those are things that we've got to look at, because our social programs are funded by us as taxpayers. Our taxpayer rates go up based on the deficits that are in these fund sources, in these fund groups, right, that are allocated. So there are several different layers to that piece, right? So I think that we have to consider the realities of us needing someone that's going to talk about improvements to social programs, someone that's going to talk about progressively moving that wage index forward, paying people a livable wage, and that kind of stuff. I think those are things that are necessary, right? I don't know. What do you think?
I think that makes sense.
Because
that's really good news for me to hear. I didn't know the minimum wage was McDonald's.
Listen. Wow. Yeah. It's been that way for I mean, it didn't move that close to anything.
That's unheard of.
Significant. It was $7.15 before then, right? You know,
So like,
it's
that was
unbelievable.
written back then and forgotten.
Unbelievable.
That's not even. I don't even know what to say.
But so let's talk about what is an alternative, because like I just said, these are things that lead to many of the parents feeling so heavily distressed that they are committing these heinous murder suicides. This is what leads to people feeling so heinously distressed that they are committing murder suicide of their intimate partners because they can't survive on their own. And it's also what leads up to people just feeling anxious and overwhelmed, even when they lose their jobs and they now have to transition to another job. Because even if a person is responsibly spending, nowadays, they don't have enough money to put in savings. So essentially, people are living from paycheck to paycheck. One of the things that my practice offers outside of just therapy and counseling services is consultation services and like parenting classes and, you know, life transition classes and things like that, right? So in these classes, oftentimes it's not like your traditional classroom where we have like a lecture that we're going to give you and checklist and that's it. We have you know, it's important to have like that person, the peer to teacher engagement, right? So that we're teaching based off of what people are currently experiencing. And by the way, the stats oftentimes that I collect from, you know, persons coming in for services or not coming in for services, etc., is based on the information and data that is collected over the course of those times. Now, when people are coming in and they're coming in for financial counseling or financial coaching services, oftentimes what I am seeing and hearing people attest to is that they're having a difficult time making ends meet because the programs are no longer approving them for social assistance. Social assistance programs go beyond food stamps, okay? Sometimes it's food stamps, sometimes it's housing, sometimes it's utility vouchers, transportation, even healthcare, right? And all right, I'm gonna just call a thing a thing. Put it out there. I was an advocate for Obamacare. You know why? I felt like Obama was a pragmatic president. And I felt like he did an amazing job on the issues that were pressing that really needed to be addressed. And I personally feel like universal health care should be a thing in America. Mm-hmm. Because as a person who has lived in so many other countries, I feel like, why don't we here have free health care for American citizens?
You know, and I remember Hillary, when Hillary was in office, she actually presented that and it was shut down.
Yep. And I think it's because she's a female.
Yeah, well, that was clear.
Okay. But also,
like her.
Yes. Yes. But I think here it does make a lot of sense because we're already paying the tariffs or taxes here in America that say we should be funding these programs. And I think there are a lot of things that we're invested in that are not giving us the level of a return that we should be getting, you know, from those particular things. I think that we have to move towards advocating to take care of us at home. And I think that's important. So those are perhaps some of the issues that I would like to see someone talk about, right? And expanding the field of mental health and, you know, streamlining the process of national licensure and things like that, things that makes it easier and more affordable for practitioners to be able to deliver the services that are needed, but also focus on the training and continuing education that are essential in order for them to remain calibrated. Because I do feel like a lot of practitioners are burned out, undercompensated, and overwhelmed, because that's, in the capacity as, as a trainer or clinicians, it's difficult for the work that we do to be undercompensated or not compensated at all by these insurances and EAPs and things timely, because those people still have to, they have to be able to afford life, right? They have to be able to live. But at the same time, they're also very dedicated to the work that they do. And it can be costly to get the trainings that are necessary to remain qualified. And I say that because, like, recently it made headlines when this guy, do you remember what state he was in? I can't remember. Maybe he was in New Jersey. Maybe you're right.
We're talking about the therapist.
Yeah, look it up really quickly, because I think he was either in New Jersey or Mississippi. Am I misquoting? Oh, you guys, I'm so sorry if I'm misquoting that he wasn't in Mississippi. I know clinicians are going to come for me, but don't come for me, okay? Pick somebody else, because I have time, okay?
Don't call me either.
Right. So listen, okay? And clinicians, please do not think that I am doing this as me being unjustly harsh on clinicians. But clinicians come in all shapes, sizes, areas, all of that good stuff, okay? And there are so many different disciplines of mental health help that a person can get, depending on where they are, right? Comprehensive mental health clinics are everywhere. However, how comprehensive is the help that you're getting, right? That's what I want to ask. In order for us to stabilize the level of hostility, aggression, emotional disturbance, depression, suicide, homicides, conduct disorder behavior, or sociopathic behavior, mood-based disorders, all of this stuff. In order for us to stabilize, we have to deliver a quality service, right, to the persons that we're providing services to. You cannot deliver a service to a person if you're not rendering a comprehensive assessment and then developing a comprehensive treatment plan to address the things that you've clinically conceptualized in that comprehensive assessment. I'm not telling you how to do your job, okay? Because regardless of which discipline or which area of mental health that you're in, these are necessities. I know a lot of people think, because listen, I'm here for accountability, okay? But a lot of people think that if a person has a license that makes them a qualified mental health provider, a license does not qualify a person, okay? A license just means that that person is now responsible to this particular body for elements of accountability. If a person or another practitioner decided to report to that entity, that means absolutely nothing for what your experience might look like when you walk through the doors. I think it's necessary to go through the process of sitting through a full-on 20-minute interview with yourself and the clinician. It's labeled as a 20-minute consult. These should be free. You should never be paying for one. So it's important for you to know what to look for and what things are red flags when you're going out to get help. You need to know that that person is able to articulate their particular clinical specialties, the things that they do, but also the things that are niche areas for them, right? Because we have some people specialize in grief counseling, right? But they don't specialize in marital counseling. But you're going to them for marriage therapy. And they have absolutely no idea how to help you. Now, it doesn't mean they cannot consult with another clinician and you're paying them to advise in the aftermath, but in the dance of the process of therapy, they can't effectively help you navigate your issues because they've never done that work. And maybe the magnitude of your problems, your issues, are outside of their scope of specialty, not scope of practice, right? So if you, it's just like deciding that, okay, you know what, I need to have hip surgery, right? But I'm going to go in, I'm going to schedule my OBGYN to do my hip surgery. The reason that you don't schedule your OBGYN to do your hip surgery, and they wouldn't dare do it, is because that's not their clinical specialty. Okay? So it's important for you to go to someone that is a qualified mental health provider versus just a licensed mental health provider, right? That's the one piece. The other piece is understanding how is self of the therapist going to affect the services that you're getting from this therapist, client, counselor, social worker, mental health. You guys got to, I'm a marriage family therapist, okay? What is the other one? Licensed mental health, LMHC, mental health counselor. All right. So if the person that you're going to doesn't have a specialty area for the issues that you're presenting with, it is their job, their duty to refer you out. Because if they don't have anybody else in that practice that can give you the services that you're needing because they don't have a specialty area there, they got to send you to somebody else that's more qualified because they know that you don't know any better, right? But I'm going to give you guys the tips and tricks for you can, support you to be able to select somebody that is the most qualified to do what it is that you need them to do. Okay? If you need trauma-informed therapy that is considered to be the most empirically backed as far as trauma that affects children that are young, under the age of 5, the type of therapy you're going to be looking for is going to be a play therapist. Now, play therapy can be extremely effective, essentially in children that are 4 to adults in their 80s and 90s, and for geriatric counseling, right? However, with younger people, it's so easy to when they're in like that 3 to 4, 3 going on 4 and 4 to 5 range, it's easier to be able to help them through trauma with play therapy modality. And you definitely want to get somebody that is certified and specialized in that area. I personally would go for a marriage and family therapist, not a marriage and family counselor, a marriage and family therapist, because that's kind of one of the natural niche areas that they're comprehensively trained on in their graduate programs and intern and all of that, because it's a necessary component, right? But that is a specialty area. The alternative for trauma in children is going to be TFCBT. That's trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. When you see people acting out, children acting out, sexualized gestures and behaviors, things like that that make you go, has someone touched this child, right? Or they're hypersensitive, hyper-responsive to anxious situations and distress around parent caregivers or adults in general, right? Makes them teary and anxious, or they're wetting the bed, things like that. I think TFCBT has probably been the most effective modality that I've ever used, I could say, to date with children, that gives us instant gratification, right? Complete 180. So what I say is find somebody who can speak to what their niche areas are. What are their clinical specialties? What do they find that they get in the most and they have experience with? And look at some of the areas that they have a particular focus or interest in as applies to counseling and therapy. Did you find that guy?
Houston.
Houston. Oh no, not Texas. Woo, no. Don't let me do that. Okay, so I have a bias because I have a lot of clinicians that come through my training programs that are in the state of Texas. He has not. He's not. He's not. There was a therapist who made national news recently. Okay. And I'm not saying that he is the only one. I don't want to pick on him, and don't call me sexist because I'm not mentioning the woman that, made national news last year for the same thing. Similar thing. I think it was worse. Okay, listen. Ethical boards are what licensed clinicians report to. Okay. This person was a therapist for a client and started dating his client. And then upon his client deciding one day while in his office after having a session that she wanted to end the relationship.
She found out he was not
because she found out he was still married and had a kid.
Mm-hmm.
He pulled a gun on the client and said that he would kill her. He held the gun to her head. I can't think of a worse scenario for a client in therapy to be in. Okay? I can't. I can't. I cannot. Okay? I'm a therapist who has a therapist. Okay? And I'm a huge advocate for therapy. I just can't. So what that says is, how safe is our client with us? If we're going to do something like that, we're all held to the same level of ethical expectation. Now, some of the laws are different and the restrictions are different and the ethical guidelines are different depending on which particular area you're housed in, right? You may be a LPC versus a social worker versus an MFT. You know what I mean? So the rules are different for what a dual relationship looks like and the length of time before or after, et cetera, for one phase of the relationship. But here's the thing. Rule of thumb. This is what I want you guys to take away from this. You do not sleep with your therapist. It's not okay for your therapist to sexualize you or the situations that you find yourself going through. I'm a sex therapist. I talk about sex all day with my clients because that's what you do in sex therapy, right? And sex therapy isn't only for altruistic disorders or sexual related disorders, right? Sexual inappropriation, behavior type of disorders, but they're also effective for trauma recovery. Okay, so I just can't imagine the poor lady being in that situation. She was on the news. You guys go look it up.
She was interviewed.
Yeah. So now not only it's a lot. It's a lot of levels. Not only is her privacy and confidentiality now violated because she's had to violate it because you've done this thing to her, right? But you bring shame. You bring shame to all of us, literally, guys. Like, and there was this one lady last year, that's the one that I mentioned. She had sex with a client. And the client was underage. I just don't understand how these things happen. I do not. I don't. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. So what I will say is that there are some things that your therapist may do, and if it's questionable, you have to be able to feel brave about bringing that up in therapy with them. Self of the therapist is the things that dictate the personification of that person, right? The individual. And I think it's important to a certain extent. I'd probably say, there are science-based outcomes studies that they've done around the importance of self of the therapist, epistemology, and epistemology is only the clinical framework in which your therapist is mostly rooted in, primarily, or trying to think of a layman way to say it.
It's a specialty.
not necessarily their specialty, right? Because like my epistemology is not necessarily my clinical specialty, but it's definitely what guides the way that I conceptualize. So it's the way that a person approaches the reasons that mental health disorders happen, right? And how it is that they're best resolved in general, right? But it may not necessarily say that that person is going to use that particular framework in order to deal with your issues, because we as systems clinicians, we're cybernetics to cybernetics. So I don't know, this is a lot of stuff that you guys don't understand, but just know, right? A systems therapist has to be eclectic in their approach in general, because there are like over 625 different frameworks of conception of how problems persist in people and how to resolve them that we have to learn and then embody. So that's a lot, right? So just imagine if the person of your therapist has certain biases. Let's say they have a bias towards people who present as bipolar disorder, right? So if a person has a bias and they say, oh, well, I don't believe anybody ever has bipolar disorder, that person's self of the therapist may be motivated by some issues that they experienced when they were exposed to a family member or themselves experienced bipolar disorder. And as a result, they may be reluctant to give you or assign you appropriate diagnosis based on your presentation of symptoms. So these are things that would mitigate you being able to effectively resolve those issues and return to any state of normalcy. You understand what I'm saying? So essentially, and although bipolar disorder is oftentimes misdiagnosed, that is a fact, right? I would be curious as to why, at the point where I'm in a treatment planning session, because that's when they're going to give you your confirmed diagnosis, is there anything else that you ruled out? That's a good question for you to ask, right? Are there some other considerations that you gave when coming up with this particular diagnosis, right? So what are we looking for if they don't mention that? Those are the questions that maybe you'd be privy to answer. Ask the clinician, and they should be able to answer, because biases could present anywhere, right? But also you can ask them about some of their biases, because the more aware of their biases that the clinician is, the more effective they are as clinicians. Because there are ways that we approach the conversation around clinical bias and self of the therapist, and we check things that come up, transference and counter-transference, things like that. But so, enough of that.
So just an explanation of when you say rule out, what does that mean? How does that translate?
Yeah, I didn't think about explaining that word.
We therapists, we understand that language. So what does that mean?
So rule out, just so you guys understand what that is before you ask the question, right? And I would be afraid the idea that your therapist wouldn't know what that means. I would just say, let's just not say we did and find another therapist. But a rule out means that we have looked at how it is that your diagnosis that has been assigned and confirmed aligns with other diagnoses that were possible. However, it's not a good fit. Your symptom presentation and the longevity that it's been presenting, etc., it's not a fit because it hasn't persisted for the right amount of time, didn't present at the right amount of time, at the right time in life, or life cycle, or the common items that were addressed made that not a good fit for a diagnosis. Common items are your history of trauma, family of origin impact, psychosocial components. That's why it's called a biopsychosocial assessment. Biological or medical issues that could be contributing to the persistence of the symptoms, or substance use history that have particularly contributed to the presenting of the symptoms, or another traumatic brain injury or something like that, right? So rule out is when we're looking at all of those factors and we're assigning the diagnosis that's the best fit based on all mitigating factors. So there's that. Did I do any other words that may be?
Because I think about that in terms of if someone is in therapy before and they were diagnosed as bipolar, comes to see you, you does all your assessment and clearly does not see bipolar. So you've given that person another diagnosis. This would be the opportunity for them to say, well, I was diagnosed bipolar by my other therapist. Did you see that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, because this is where I'm speaking from right now is the treatment planning.
The treatment planning session. Doesn't understand this lingo.
Right.
I was diagnosed bipolar.
So that's what I'm saying. That question should be addressed during the initial biopsychosocial assessment because that's a question. That's a specific area that the clinician should be addressing because one of the questions on a biopsychosocial assessment should be, have you ever seen a clinician for mental health or behavioral health or, outpatient crisis stabilization before? Have you ever been hospitalized? What were the outcomes? What were the diagnoses? What were the treatment plans, right? What happened and how did you respond to that as a result of that experience? So that's a specific question. So that should have already been discussed prior to the confirmation of diagnosis conversation that happens during treatment planning, which is a separate appointment. So there are like steps, that we take as clinicians that get us to where we're going in being able to speak to what it is, what work we'll be doing in therapy. And if you've not done that, if they've not given that to you, right, then you kind of missed the mark. And remember that therapy and counseling services, coaching service, etc., these are forms of self-care. That's your way of advocating for your right to remain and be well and fit in all ways, not just physically. We need to be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically fit. These are things that help us lead and live out our best lives. These are things that help us remain calibrated. These are things that help us speak to our level of cognizance when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to interacting in relationships, when it comes to choosing which job we want to work for, which company we want to work for, or how much we decide to take from a person that's our leadership in our jobs, So prioritize yourself so that the value of you increases when you do decide to add yourself to another system, right? So moving on, our last topic for the day is, of course, relationship talk. When do you leave an abusive relationship? What do you think, Susie? And do you think that could be a reason that a person comes to therapy?
Most of the time, probably people are coming to make a decision on whether to stay or leave. And is it safe? When is it safe enough to do that? Or how do I find a safe avenue to be able to leave? Most of the time, folks who come in that's been in an abusive relationship have been in that relationship for quite some time. So there's a way of how they've been able to function, that they are now coming in therapy and looking for another way to be and to get out safely. Because safety then becomes a relationship. If I leave, I may not make it. I am afraid to leave because he or she makes it. I mean, the reality is women are abusive. So there can be relationships where women actually are really abusive to the man. So it's how do I leave without losing my life?
So when you say women are abusive,
Well, I think people often believe that men are the one who abuses women and doesn't perceive that women do have that level of control over men as well and can be just as physically controlling, not just me. I think if you take a poll, you'll find that out. People really believe men are more abusive. Men are the ones who are abusive, and the idea of a woman who's abusive, controlling, holding him against his will, beating him up, actually causing physical harm to him, doesn't seem like a reality.
So I think I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to agree with you. Because I've had, as a family therapist, I have had several situations of abuse come in and women are the aggressor. I've had a lot of sexual abuse cases, like people coming in for because we do like classes for victims recovery and perpetrators recovery of sexual abuse and things like that too. I've had a lot of people come in for help around resolving some issues that they've experienced as a result of being assaulted by a woman, both physically and sexually, also mentally, emotionally. Women and men are both potential perpetrators of abuse. Some relationships are two women, some relationships are two men. Some relationships are polyamorous relationships where you see a multitude of various sexual orientations, right? The thing is, when you have people that are bisexual, when you have people that are heterosexual, when you have people that are, a variety of gender identities as well, you still have people. And the person component is what contributes to the potential for violence in a relationship. And that's based on a history of trauma. That's based on a history of life experience that has avoided trauma. So sometimes enabling behavior of our systems. It's a lot of contributing factors. Because what happens is over the course of a person's lifespan, we are learning during the different phases of life. If we evolve and we learn that everything is supposed to be our way, and that no one is supposed to tell us no, and that nobody is supposed to pursue their own goals, that when someone is with us, they have to leave us as the primary area or person or focus in a relationship, and that they can't have any individuation or individuality. When we learn that we are the priority in a relationship or we are the prize, I think all of those elements are toxic components that are conditioning in people. As a result of that, it leads to abusive relationships. And it doesn't always lead to a physically abusive relationship, but it's going to be abusive in some way. I think knowing when to leave is knowing whether or not to even step in. It's about getting yourself together. As I mentioned on the last talking point, therapy is a part of self-care. That's when we learn to self-actualize, self-validate, and go within, call a thing a thing, right? And repair the things that we've identified about us that need to be recalibrated or it needs to appear in a different way, right? So if we do those things, we already know which things to look for in another person because we've finally gotten to know the things within our own person, the elements that make us us. If we spend time getting to know us, we can excel at properly aligning ourselves with people who bring out the best in us. And the best in us does not draw in on abusive people to be in our circle. So it's one of those things. It's like, if you have boundaries and you know what a boundary is and you respect your boundaries, it will call for other people to do the same, to respect your boundaries. And you won't find yourself in these particular type of relationships. So when you find that you're in an abusive relationship and it doesn't even have to be an abusive relationship. It could be a relationship that simply is not conducive to the goals and the direction in which you see yourself, evolving into. The time to leave is when you no longer feel validated and heard by the person that you're navigating life with. And that is beyond repair and beyond reproach. So if that person doesn't think that you're important enough to be validated, to be cared for, to be loved in the way that you've articulated you needed to be loved, to be respected in the way that you've articulated you need to be respected, to be provided for in the way that you articulated you want it to be provided for, and they've agreed to provide for you. It's about having healthy boundaries at the beginning of a ship before it sails. So you don't have to jump off the boat midstream. Okay? So I think it goes to, if you got to leap, take a leap of faith and know that this is no longer good because you tried to resolve the issues that are there and you notice that you're getting nowhere, but you've also created a healthy safety net or a safe plan, safe exit plan, right? Because I think an exit plan is important, especially when we're talking about violence, right? Abusive relationships, whether they're physically violent already or they're just emotionally violent or spiritually draining and violent, either way, you still have to create a safety plan of exit. So after you've had time to do that, and make sure that you have somebody or somebody's there to help you make your exit, and you have a safe place to go that that person won't find you. Wipe out all of the phones, all of the things that you had, and jolt. Okay? Okay?
Take the important papers with
you. Because you should have already organized and put your important papers in a good place. Right? You should have a safe place, right, to put those things. And you should have already done your due diligence to make sure that upon your exit, that person cannot locate you. And I always say the safest way is to go out, get another cell phone, start putting these things into place. If you don't have the financial resources, go to, what is that thing? They have advocacy support centers that will give you temporary shelter until you can get to one of the victims or victims of domestic violence shelters. And they will also provide like transportation and, some advocacy and advice, and give you a personal counselor to help you with the transition. And they'll give you the things that you need, right? The resources that you need to restabilize. But I think the most important thing is once you've created a healthy exit plan, and the most important thing, do not tell people, even if you think you can trust them, that you're now leaving this person. Okay? Wait until you're in a safe location, and that you, after having advocated for your physical safety and you've gone through the process of getting the proper restraining orders and everything against that person, and law enforcement has contracted for your safety, then reach out to maybe some people that doesn't know that person, right? And then reestablish relationships with people based on how much you do or don't understand that you really can trust them, because I think that's the most important piece. If we are in toxic relationship with people, and those people are connected to the people that we trust, we shouldn't be reaching back out to those people, because they're connected to them too, right? And it's not about being paranoid or suspicious. It's just about being properly cautious and protecting your interests, right? You got anything else, Susie? Anything else on that one?
Yeah, and I really think that's really where therapists can help walk you through doing some of the things that you need to do to move on. Because often in violence, domestic violence issue, that person has been groomed to be separated. So they usually most of the time don't have a person they can really trust and be able to make those plans with, or even know how to do that, how to do what to do. You might kind of have an idea what to do, but how do I really execute that in a way that he doesn't find out or she doesn't find out? Because then I put my life in my destiny. And working with a therapist or who is skilled in knowing how to do that really helps. Because they could get you into places that would be beneficial. Also, usually domestic violence, they don't have a name attached to them. It's designed so that nobody knows where you are. You are able to move into a place that is more to documents and be able to move on without that the perpetrator knowing
the specifics of where you are.
That you're planning something.
Mm-hmm.
And getting a therapist is even difficult because that would be an issue.
Right. Because the other piece is oftentimes when you're in abusive relationships, they seek to isolate you from resources and other people, family, from friends, and all of that. So it's important. I think all of those are very important points that you made. But also, I think it's really important to know that you have to be careful about who it is and how you trust when you're moving forward.
And they'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that they do tell you when you reach out to these domestic violence hotlines. And
it's tough when you have kids.
Yeah, it is. But it's necessary.
Yeah. And the kid still has to go to that same school that he or she's been going. The perpetrator knows.
No, well, not at the point where you get victim services involved. The kid they come out of the school immediately. They never return back to the same school because they know that that's a direct link to the perpetrator. So I think that parents are oftentimes having the fear of, if I take my kid out of school, DFACS is going to get involved and they're going to go and they're going to tell them where I am. Let me tell you something. If that's a concern, worry about that stuff later. Yeah. What I can guarantee you, one thing for certain, two things, okay, for certain. They won't come for you. They will not. All of these different systems are in collaboration with one another. One hand talks to the other. And there is a continuous conversation going on between the two. Okay? So let those people advocate for your safety and let them worry about the details of those things. And you worry about getting yourself to the facility and during the time that you know that person won't be around. Make that your priority. So even if the person you're with is a part of law enforcement. So, that is all that I have. My final thoughts are, I did see your last comment. I think it's Japheth, Mr. Harris. We're going to go with that. Now, I do feel like, there are, Americans are definitely spoiled. I'm not going to lie about that. Follow me for long enough. You know how I feel about that. But just because Americans are spoiled doesn't mean that it justifies a country that is going to continuously take advantage of them and not equip them with the resources that they need to do the things they need to do as independent American citizens, because they're paying the cost regardless. So that is all that I have, you guys. Thank you for sitting out, contributing, and listening as we navigated the difficult discussions. Okay. So if you guys are not already following me, do hit the like button and subscribe and hit the notification bell. I am typically live on YouTube, Facebook. I try to do X, but it's kind of hard because, I don't really be on there. I don't really know how to use it. I also have a TikTok, but you can find me anywhere that you receive podcasts. Just look up Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson, and also hashtag #LQJ DOC LQJ speaks. And that's how you'll find me. and my content. It's a ton of it out there. I appreciate you guys for sitting through, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later days. Bye.